Lab listeners, and welcome to an interview episode with the Arts Management and Technology Lab. My name is Alyssa, and I am the podcast producer. In this episode, Grace Puckett and I sit down with Christian Cox, Director of Marketing and Communications with the Pittsburgh Opera, and David Dombrosky, Chief Marketing Officer at Instant Encore. We will talk about the development, release, and the many features of the Pittsburgh Opera Mobile App. We hope you enjoy this interview, brought to you by Antilab. We are here with Chris Cox of the Pittsburgh Opera and David Dombrosky of Instant Encore to talk about the Pittsburgh Opera app. So, gentlemen, could you take a moment to introduce yourselves for our listeners?
Sure. Hi there. My name is Chris Cox. I'm Director of Marketing and Communications for Pittsburgh Opera.
And I'm David Dombrosky. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for Instant Encore.
All right, perfect. So before we get started today, I actually need to throw in a quick little disclaimer. I actually interned with the Pittsburgh Opera for the 1819 season.
You sure did.
I did. That was with the development team, and while I did not help out with this particular app, I was around for some of the beta tests that were taking place, and I was there during the app's official release this past spring. So, David, it's very good to meet you, but Chris, it's great to see you again.
Thanks for having me back. Appreciate
Good to meet you.
Yeah.
All right, coolness.
So the Pittsburgh Opera app is an app designed to enhance the performance process from start to finish. One of its most prominent features is providing program notes in real time during performances, but the app also includes a calendar of events, video clips, photos, artist bios, links to social media, ways to purchase tickets, and a feature to donate to the opera. When thinking about this, what encouraged you to develop an app for the opera? Can you talk a little bit about that process within the development of having this app come to fruition?
Sure. So I came to Pittsburgh Opera about 4 years ago, and at that time, Pittsburgh Opera did not have a mobile app at all. And there was discussion of, do we need one or not? We had just relaunched a website that was mobile-friendly using responsive design, and people could access most of the content you're referring to through their smartphones already. Did we need an app as well, right? Mm-hmm. And my belief was that an app would be beneficial, right? There are certain things you can do in an app. There's certain things an app makes easier than a mobile website. Things like push notifications, for example. And the challenge really was finding the right app solution. Mm-hmm. I had worked at a software digital marketing company for 6 years where we made apps, and I knew firsthand how labor intensive and expensive it can be to create your own app from scratch and then maintain it and so forth. So really what I was searching for was a platform that had a lot of these features and bells and whistles baked in already that we could simply license and install and set up and manage, without having to worry about the back-end development and creation. And that's where I met David and the folks at Instant Encore.
Yeah, so our Absention platform is actually 10 years old. We launched our first app with the platform in 2009 with the New York Philharmonic, and we've powered hundreds of apps with it since then. And so that's one part of it, one piece of it. But the real-time program note you're talking about is actually an entirely separate product called LiveNote that integrates with the Absention platform. So you can have LiveNote independent of an app. It can be done through a web link that takes your patrons to the content as well. But when you integrate it with the app, it unlocks some additional things. We can actually take advantage of some of the native technology features. We can detect, for example, with Pittsburgh Opera, we can detect if someone has their headphones plugged in. And if they do not, then we do not allow them to hear the audio. Whereas in the web version of it, we have to prompt them differently. We actually have to say, do you have your headphones plugged in? Because if they say yes, then it's going to play the audio, regardless of whether they have them in or not. So for people who are looking at doing something with audio involved like Pittsburgh wanted to do, I do really recommend the native app version just because of that ability to take advantage of that.
And from Pittsburgh Opera's standpoint, so we had the quote unquote base version of the app, for a couple of years, and it was going great. We were happy with it. We were updating content. We were using it. We had users downloading, interacting with it, etc. And that was all fine. But we were trying to think of new ways to engage our audiences. Right? We're always looking for, well, what can we do better? We never want to rest on our laurels or anything like that. And someone had the idea of, boy, it'd be really neat if we could deliver some supplemental content to patrons during performances, right? And this is sort of a revolutionary idea, but in other ways it was more of an evolutionary idea. Mm-hmm. If any opera you go to of ours for years and years and years, you can see English supertitles projected above the stage on a screen, like a PowerPoint slide, basically. So no matter what language the opera is sung in, you can sit there and read and follow along and know what the singers are saying, right? So in that sense, hey, that's extra from the performance itself, but it's a part of the show that everyone is used to and most people find very helpful. We also offered and pioneered something about 10, 15 years ago, our audio commentary program. And this was geared towards patrons with visual impairments, so blind people, for example. And if they can't see what's happening on stage, right, but they can hear the music, they can hear the singing, they can come to one of our performances on Tuesday. Right? This is something that's done live in real time and is very labor intensive. We only offer at our Tuesday performances, but they can basically rent these headsets from the Benedum Center, for example, for free. And we have a person in a booth essentially narrating what's happening on stage. Right. So you can say, this person just picked up a knife, or this person opened a door, or whatever, so that the patron, besides hearing the singing and the music, can have a sense of what's happening on stage as well, right? So that's okay. They're using a supplemental device in the theater to enhance their experience. Mm-hmm. So we want to sort of build on those concepts and provide people with ways to essentially get color commentary about the show. And the way that we ended up doing it was with this Live Note module within the app we already had, right? And so from our patron standpoint, our user standpoint, it's still Pittsburgh Opera's mobile app. Now it can just do some extra things that it couldn't before, right? So that user simplicity was very, very important to us.
And that then negated the necessity of any patrons coming in and having to download a new app, which is
correct.
I know that sometimes that's a barrier to getting people to use these kinds of technology when you're rolling them out, because they're like, I just downloaded one like a month ago. Why do I have to do another one?
Exactly.
Okay. And I'm just curious, too, when you're saying additional to what is already offered, does that include, and forgive me, I don't know if Pittsburgh Opera does this. I assume it does, but I like to ask. Is there included some sort of like storyline within a program? Is that something that Pittsburgh Opera does? I know that some organizations do, but I don't know how paper.
So we have a printed program book, for all of our performances, and the ushers will give those out to the patrons as they're going to their seats. We take a PDF of that program book, printed program book, and we upload it to our website and to our mobile app.
Okay, so it's integrated in even if they have it in hard copy.
Exactly, exactly. Some people, let's say we run out, we sell more tickets than we're expecting, right? Anyone could get the program through the mobile app or through our website if they chose to.
Right, okay.
Well, and I think it's important to note that the content you do through Live Note is not the same content that appears in the written program notes.
Right.
And I think people probably might confuse that. They might say, well, why are you doing program notes in an app? I can just read them in the book. Because it's totally different. They're actually leveraging the context of the performance moment to talk about what's going on right now and give commentary on what's going on specifically at this moment. And that's entirely different experience than sitting down, reading program notes in advance, and trying to recollect everything you just read at different moments during the performance. It's different.
Okay.
So for our season opening opera this fall was Mozart's Don Giovanni. And the production that we did, well, we call it the film noir production, where the sets, the costumes, the lighting, everything was very inspired by classic film noir movies. And we had the stage director, Christine McIntyre, who was the creator, the inventor of this particular production. We had her pre-record little audio tidbits about different scenes. And during the performance, if you had the app up, when we got to a certain part of the opera, you would hear Christine, if you had your earbud in, pipe up with, "Oh, see this right here? This was inspired by the such and such movie, with this character," and so on, right? And, "Oh, there's Donna Elvira. The outfit she's wearing was, inspired by the character so-and-so in the 1940 classic blah, blah," right? So it was literally like having the director sitting in the seat next to you, whispering in your ear, with this behind-the-scenes stuff, right? It was really, really cool.
No, that sounds amazing. It sounds like with the app, versus the paper, you kind of given an overview. It's very, I don't want to say generic, but it's a very simple thing, whereas with the app, you're able to kind of get into the mind of those who are involved and get into a little bit of that stuff you're not necessarily able to do in the program, because if you did that in the program, it'd probably be much larger than it already is to begin with.
Well, and as David said, the app content is delivered in real time. So
Right.
the content is created in advance, and it is uploaded into the CMS in advance. But we have a live person in a booth in the theater with her laptop up there, with the CMS open, and she is hitting next, next at certain cues. She follows along on the musical score, right? And when she gets to certain measures in the score, then boom, she hits the next button,
that's
and
neat.
on your app in real time, poof, up comes this content. So it is literally of the moment, right? And she is very, very careful to deliver it at appropriate times, because no one wants someone yapping in your ear at during a wonderful solo where the
Right.
singer is pouring her heart and soul out and telling the character how much she loves him. We don't want to interrupt that, right? So the content is delivered during lulls, right? During changes in the set or things like that, when it is not disruptive.
And I think that's what makes it work, because I think most people probably in the opera industry, when they heard that you were doing this, were like, "That's insane. What are you doing? You're giving them audio content while people are actually delivering audio from the stage. What are you doing?"
I was wondering about that.
And so, of course, it sounds counterintuitive, exponentially. But what's really interesting is how Mia at Pittsburgh Opera, one, she creates the commentary notes. And then two, she is there deciding, all right, this is the right lull now, because, you get to a measure number, but sometimes things can be happening on stage that are out of sync with what you think they would be.
Not at our performances.
But no, Mia talks about it, though, like when she goes into a dress rehearsal and she goes back and edits because she's like, okay, that needs to be moved. That comment needs to be moved to a different place because of what's happening on stage at that moment.
Our artistic staff tests the app at our rehearsals and gives me this feedback about, oh, you know what, like this was a little bit too long, or this started a little too late, or you need to wait a little bit longer before you do this one, for those exact reasons. So there's a lot of testing and learning and trial and error that happens during the rehearsal process, so that when the performances actually happen, it can run smoothly. And you're building off what David said in terms of, it sounds counterintuitive, to be doing this. I can make the analogy of, well, you're watching a baseball game on TV, and the commentators are quiet in the middle of a base hit, right? But then, okay, the player's on base, now they start talking, and it's, oh yeah, well, he golfed that fastball, hit it the opposite way, and they wait until there's a lull to say that sort of stuff, and it can enhance your enjoyment of the ball game, and this is meant to do something very similar.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I really like everything that you described so far with the app and its development, not only in the way that it enhances the performance in so many different ways, but also how inclusive it is as well, for not only those with disabilities, but for those that are very new to opera and want to learn more information about how everything connects and why the singer may approach an aria a certain way, or why the stage is set up the way it is. So that's really cool.
Mia is very careful to think about different kinds of audience members as she prepares the content. We want to always attract new opera goers. Audience development is important for us and for every arts organization out there, right? We're always hoping to grow our audience base and introduce new people to our art form and our productions and performances. We know that opera as a genre, suffers from some negative stereotypes and misconceptions, misperceptions about what it is that typically boils down to, oh, it's not for me. Right, and
I call that a perceptual barrier.
It is 100% a perceptual barrier. Yeah,
and there are a lot of art forms that have that. Where people are like, yeah, but it's not for me, and I think this is a really great tool for knocking down that perceptual barrier, because the people who have the perceptual barrier, who are actually sitting in your audience, are usually the plus ones, right? Either their spouse or their girlfriend or boyfriend drag them to a show, or they're, appeasing one of their friends and tagging along. And this is a great opportunity to turn that, tentative plus one into, okay, I need to come back and see more of this.
Absolutely. And we want to be able to make people feel comfortable with the show, that they'll understand what's happening and they won't feel like they're lost, right? So, hey, there's some extra content that gives me some background and perspective and explains terms that I might not be familiar with. All these things are making me feel comfortable and helping me understand that this really isn't that scary after all. This is actually pretty neat and pretty fun. Oh, I'm glad that I learned this, I'm glad that I learned that.
Can you tell us how much time it takes to maintain or update the app for a new performance?
So I'll answer that question two different ways, where we have general content updates for the app that are separate from the live note performance aspects of it, right? And those are generally pretty minimal. We enter all of our events before the season starts. We enter headshots and bios for our artists, those kinds of things that, once it's set, it's pretty much set for the season. So that's not that labor intensive. You need to be conscientious about it, but it's not overly, time consuming. In terms of creating the live performance experience, that takes a considerable amount of time and effort among a whole broad range of folks at the opera. Not just Mia Bonnewell, who writes the content, much of the content for us, but people from the production department, right? Oftentimes guest artists, like I mentioned, the director Christine McIntyre, right? It was very time-consuming for her to prepare this content for us. Then Mia has to enter it all into the CMS, and then, as I mentioned, we do testing, we do dry runs at our rehearsals, right? Just to get the timings right and tinker with things and so forth. So it is something that we knew it would be. We knew that to do it right would take some commitment, right? Some time and some effort. And we were very fortunate that we got some grants, both from Opera America as well as from the Hillman Foundation, that allowed us to, hire someone like Mia to prepare this stuff, right? And support some of the staff time and so forth that was required to get this right for each of the performances. So it's about as much work as you would expect it to be, right? Meaning it's a considerable amount of work, but it needs to be in order to get it right.
And I would say probably any of our clients who are using Live Note for the live performance aspect of it would tell you that the creation of the content is the most labor-intensive part of it. And, that's because you're trying to determine what are the key pieces of information that are really going to bring a different level of understanding to this contextual moment, and trying to determine your pacing as well. You don't want to front load everything. You don't want to have everything, being said within a 3-minute period. You need to figure out, how do I space this out? And so a lot of it is just not just identifying the content, but then figuring out what's the proper pacing for delivery. And that's when you're talking about commentary. We have other folks who are using Live Note for delivering translations, or, so you can get the libretto in multiple languages. Or we have others who actually have, There's River Oaks Chamber Orchestra out of Houston. One of the things I love about them is all of their notes are written by one of their musicians. And I'm going to give a shout out to Matt, who is their principal percussionist. He's cheeky, and I love it because anyone who's following Matt's commentary is going to have an entirely different flavor of the performance than somebody sitting down the aisle from them who's not. You're going to have entirely different experiences of the production.
Interesting. So maybe it takes a special skill set to deliver these or write these notes, or maybe there's more of a creative aspect to it?
We actually had... So Live Note was created by the Philadelphia Orchestra. Origin goes all the way back to 2011. A professor from Drexel University took a number of students to their first orchestral performance, which was with Philadelphia Orchestra. And when he was talking with them afterwards, he realized they were lost. They had no frame of reference for the music that they were hearing. They were entirely unfamiliar with it. They didn't know where their eye should be looking on the stage at any given moment, which instruments are playing. They walked out feeling like they just had a meh kind of experience. And so he took that information to Philly and they really sat with it and they were like, okay, so how can we help people who are new to an art form or new to a particular work? How can we help bring them closer to the work? Maybe not as close as somebody who's heard it or seen it 10 times, 15 times, 20 times in their life. But how can we bring them closer to it than somebody who's coming in cold, knowing nothing? Mm-hmm. And so they worked together. In 2014, they launched the first version of Live Note, and it was a standalone mobile app at the time. And Instant Encore, we were powering a Philadelphia Orchestra mobile app. So they actually, at that time, did have people downloading two different apps. And in 2017, we started talking with them, why don't we bring your Live Note content into your Philadelphia Orchestra app, keep it all branded, one app, they don't have to download two. They thought that was a great idea, and they were very generous and said, why don't you make Live Note available to anyone who has an app at that time? And that's how it became possible for Pittsburgh Opera at that point. And so we launched version 2 of Live Note in August of 2018. So, yeah, people are using it in different ways. In Philadelphia, they actually have provided us a number of tips that we have on our website of how do you write content for presentation during a live performance in a way that's not distracting. And so they talk about it, and a lot of it is, one of the things is going away from some of the issues that have taken place with written program notes over the years, where they've taken a more formalized tone or almost an academic feel to them, stripping that away and being conversational. Stripping it away and still being able to be informative, still be able to introduce new concepts to people, but to talk about it in a way that's much more casual in your vocabulary and your everyday way of speaking.
It's intended to be approachable, right? Yeah, we for our newer patrons, we want them to feel very comfortable and feel like this is an approachable art form for them. And it's important that the app conveys that as well.
So on that note, since we know that the app is designed to cater to all of these kinds of audiences, both new and familiar to opera, thinking of how the Live Note aspect of this app is designed to enhance the overall experience by giving these additional program notes, additional knowledge, getting in the mind of the director, with those who may be wary of this app and just having this technology in this space because they're afraid it may detract from their experience, whether it's because they have a device out or they see someone else having that device out. What is your kind of response to those who may be afraid of this, the notion of having a technology in a space that has traditionally been considered by many to not have technology involved, even though we know it does, but in terms of like from the audience perspective forward?
We have gone out of our way, working with the folks at Instant Encore, to make sure that there is minimal to no disruption to nearby patrons by those who use the app. The two kinds of disruption that patrons might fear when they hear of the idea of the app before they know anything about it, the first two things they worry about are the noise is gonna bother me, or the light is gonna bother me, right? So there are safeguards that we've collaborated on to put in place to protect against each of those. From a noise standpoint, as David mentioned earlier, the audio content only gets delivered if you have earphones plugged in, or earbuds and Bluetooth and so forth. So, and we've tested this over and over and over, right? Have it in your earbud in, great. Yank it out of your phone, can't hear it anymore. So there is really no risk of noise seepage for spilling over to the patron sitting next to you, right? Or if you are a patron and the person next to you is using the app, you're not going to hear what they're hearing. So that, and we tested that all last season, and we're very comfortable that the noise is not going to be an issue for folks. In terms of light seepage, there were several different things that Instant Encore and we worked on together to minimize that as well. Basically, it's on a dark screen. We use purple text on a black background, right? And David and his team built in some controls into the CMS where we can literally adjust the brightness settings for the app experience, so that if your phone is on a setting of 80 out of 100 brightness, for example, but we want our app experience at 30, when you use the app, even though your phone's set to 80, it's going to show up at 30, right? And therefore, the light seepage is minimal. As part of our rehearsal testing process, we make sure that the slides, whether there's this text, or a photo, that they are up for just long enough for people to be able to read it and see it, and then we go to a blank slide, meaning a black background, right? So we don't leave a photo of something up there for 6 minutes before the next cue might happen to come up. So it's in, it's out, right? And we did a lot of testing in the theaters all through last season to see, how noticeable is it, right? And it really is not very noticeable. Like you have to go looking for it to see that it's there.
I was really surprised with the dimness factor because before the audience would decide what dimness level, they would access the control panel in Live Node and take the dimness to whatever level they needed, but it wasn't being set as a default by the organization. So that's something we did build in for this season. And what I find really interesting is like with something like Don Pasquale or even a Don Giovanni where the palette's darker, that you can take the dimness down to like 10% and it's still incredibly legible in a darkened theater, but it does drastically reduce the light pollution, the ambient light. The other thing is the do not disturb prompt. So we added this as well, where you can, the flip of a switch, you can, in the CMS, it will prompt the user to put their phone into do not disturb. And that way it keeps things from like their notifications, from their text messages, notifications. It puts all of that on hold.
Oh, nice.
Until the end of the performance.
Cool. So this is a lot of great information that you're providing us with today. I'm curious, is there one thing you wish you knew about the development process before you started?
I'm going to let Chris answer that.
The short answer is not really. We understood going into this that there would be a lot of experimentation needed, and that we would sort of learn by doing, and I don't want to say trial and error, but we knew that there'd be a lot of experimentation required, and that was why we took the time to spend an entire season testing this very discreetly before we finally rolled it out to people, for real. So we built in a lot of time, a lot of resources and effort into learning the best way to roll this out so that it would simultaneously add value to patrons who choose to use it while not disrupting patrons who weren't using it. So we knew that it was going to be a lengthy process, and we were prepared for that. So there weren't any hidden gotchas that we thought, oh my God, like, whoa, if only we had done this beforehand, then things would have turned out better. But this turned out pretty well, and that's because we were able to be deliberate and partner with the folks at Instant Encore on a lot of these features and functionality.
I will say that that's something that you did very smartly that many arts managers, when they're adopting new technology, do not do. And that's give yourself time to experiment, give yourself time to find out what's not working before you turn it into a pivotal part of what you do. And you know, for a lot of us, what happens is we decide we need to do something, address a certain issue or challenge, and we find a technology solution that will help us do that. And then we just anticipate it's going to be perfect out of the box. And these are tools. No tool is going to be perfect out of the box. Mm-hmm. It's all in how you use it and how you adapt it to what you do. And I think that's something that a lot of arts managers could really learn from, is building in the time to experiment with the technology before you take it live and make it a pivotal part of what you're doing.
I mean, for example, the original Live Note didn't have the audio capabilities. Right. That was something that we added through this grant from Opera America. And the fall of our 2018-2019 season, the first two performances, we did testing where the audio wasn't done yet. Right. There was no audio. David's team was creating that capability, and we said, you know what, in the meantime, why don't we at least get the block and tackle down here? Why don't we at least, acclimate ourselves and get comfortable using the base product, so that then when the audio capability gets rolled out next, all we have to do is learn that one extra part rather than starting from scratch. Mm-hmm. Right. So we definitely want to take our time with that.
So on that note, I mean, you sort of answered the next question that I have. So I guess I'm going to ask if you can maybe bring in a couple other things. Outside of the time that it takes to really go into app development and making sure that it fits your organization's needs, what might you recommend to arts managers or organizations who want to develop a similar kind of app?
Well, all right. So if you want to deliver content in real time during a live event or performance, the thing I would tell you is make sure you have a game plan for how you introduce it to your audience, because you're introducing change. You're introducing change into a space they thought they knew, and so when you're introducing that kind of change, they're relying on you to set the tone, so like a great example is like during the testing. Oh my God, there was that one time where at La Boheme where I was sitting down the aisle from you and Emily, and the usher came up and told you to turn off your phones. This was during testing, right? So, there hadn't been an announcement from the stage letting everyone in the theater know this was okay. And so this one usher just came up and was like, "Sir, you need to turn off your phone."
Well, the funny thing about that was I'd actually given a talk to all the ushers before the doors opened and said, by the way, we're going to have some folks testing this functionality in our app. We're sitting over there. It's okay. And I think she just might have not been paying attention to that part of my speech.
She might not have heard that. But it's different now, because now you've got, Christopher, who will say this is happening and this is okay. Mm-hmm. And that makes the audience feel like, oh, okay.
And when you mention Christopher, you're referring to the general director of the Pittsburgh Opera that's going up on stage and making this announcement and letting the audience know, hey, this is taking place and it's a change and here's what to expect.
Yeah, and I think when you set the tone that way, then that mitigates anything like dealing with another audience member who's irritated because you have your phone out. You don't have that because they've already been told it's okay. And so you just have to think through that kind of strategy when you're introducing something new into an experiential environment like that.
There was definitely a vocal minority who were vehemently opposed to the very notion of this experience, right? Very, very, upset by the thought that we were going to do this, and tried to talk us out of it and make us change our mind and not go through with it and so forth. So, for other arts organizations out there who are considering this, I'd say be prepared for that sort of, fear. But, we pushed ahead anyway, and we've now had 8 public performances, across 2 productions this fall under our belts, and there was a sum total of 1 person who actually complained about someone near them using the app, and somehow the person using the app was behind the person who complained, and somehow they still were upset by it. But this is out of thousands and thousands of patrons over the course of 8 different performances. The fear that this is going to somehow incite mass chaos did not come to pass. And the other thing I would say is, it's a great tool. We're very excited about it. We're continuing to use it, all season and in the future. But manage your own expectations. It's not like a silver bullet. It's not like all of a sudden, we're selling out every performance because this app now exists. It's one arrow in the quiver, so to speak. And our usage rates, through these first 8 performances are anywhere from between 3 to 6-ish%. And that is in line and actually above what our research has shown museum app experiences, are used at. So it's a very positive first step, but don't expect everyone in the theater to be using this. And in a way, that's probably a good thing, because we like it to be sort of introduced a little more gradually, and then the people who are worried about it, all of a sudden they realize, oh, yeah, you know what, that didn't bug me at all. I didn't even know it was happening, and then, I didn't know it. Then all of a sudden they're used to it being a part of the experience, right? So in a way, the sort of slow build is probably for everyone's benefit.
I like, though, how you actually, you invited one of those very vocal, vehement detractors to come and experience it, because they were very vocal about the concept without ever having seen it in the real world, And you guys are smart. You invited them and said, you know what, why don't you come in and experience it, and you tell us if it's distracting.
Oh, that's brilliant.
And yeah, no, it was really smart, because it turned them around on it.
We've essentially offered, free tickets to, I don't like the idea of this. I'm afraid it would just be a distraction and take my eyes off the stage or whatever. So tell you what, that's fine. Come enjoy the performance the way you normally would. If you would like to come back and see the performance a second time, just so you can try it with the app, let us know. We'll be happy to take care of that for you. Right? A few people took us up on the offer. But yeah, another thing I mentioned, we talked a lot about trying to use this to ease opera neophytes into the art form. There's actually a lot of content that is for the aficionados, so the connoisseurs as well. One of the folks that we invited to come test with us for La Boheme, he had seen La Boheme, like I said, like 14 times. Like somebody, he lost count of how many times he'd seen La Boheme over the years, right, in different cities and different productions and different countries and so forth. And at the end of the rehearsal, he said, wow, I learned so much about this production, about this opera, that I never knew before, thanks to this app. This was really interesting, right? So yeah, there's a lot of content for the aficionados as well as for the neophytes.
Interesting. Cool. Yeah. All right. Well, David, Chris, thank you so much for joining us today for this interview. This has been a lot of fun, and we learned a great deal from you guys, so thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for inviting us.
Actually make my way over to the opera and use the app, because I have not been yet.
We certainly hope so.
All righty.
Thank you, gentlemen.
So, for our listeners, if you would like to read more regarding Instant Encore and their app development, you can check out their website at instantencore.com. Additionally, Instant Encore has a blog on their website regarding apps specifically for opera, and this blog can be found at blog.instantencore.com/tag/opera. Thanks for listening to the Arts Management and Technology Lab podcast series. You can read more on the intersection between the arts and technology at www.amt-lab.org. Or you can listen to more interviews and discussions in our podcast series on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, or Stitcher. Thank you for joining us.